And as Rob mentioned, the agenda today is to review targeted ad serving in kind of a phased approach here. So my goal is to kind of give you a brief overview as to why you should be looking into targeted digital advertising. Why is this kind of becoming such a prevalent topic at this point in time? Obviously go into the nuts and bolts of how this works in kind of a stepped process. Give you a little bit of a case study and background as to what you might expect from this type of a solution. And then, as Rob mentioned, the goal is to, at the end, address any questions that you might have as a result of my presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into this presentation. So, excuse me, as I mentioned, why targeted digital advertising? So as Rob was kind of framing up today's presentation, obviously this idea of multi-touch or omni-channel marketing in today's environment is becoming kind of more and more popular, more and more prevalent, and companies are really rushing to try and get on board this bandwagon as much as humanly possible. However, tried and true marketing is still very, very effective, such as direct mail, email marketing. As you can see littered throughout this presentation, we'll be talking a lot about print and direct mail. So basically, digital as a channel is a great way of bridging the gap between what you might consider your offline campaigns and your online campaigns, again, such as digital ad serving. So again, this idea of email and print. So basically, these campaigns are really aimed to improve the results of your offline campaigns as I'm talking about these. So again, your direct mail campaigns, your email campaigns, what have you. So you can basically target those folks, let's just focus on direct mail for a moment, that you're hitting with either direct mail or, again, with email, with some sort of a touch point, kind of across all aspects of media. So as they're receiving their direct mail and or email, they may also be receiving targeted digital ads, or maybe you're even doing all three at the same time. So again, this kind of cross-channel exposure is aiming really at amplifying and getting and maximizing response rate, sales, and overall ROI as a result of that. So that kind of brings us to a little bit about the results as I talk about really amplifying the results of existing campaigns, which we'll get into as we go through this presentation. But one of the key areas that we've really found this making its biggest impact, as it can be used as a standalone marketing solution, but again, it's in its usage with something else. So combined with a mail campaign or a email campaign, you can expect anywhere between 20 to 40% lift in an A/B test split, which we'll be reviewing in detail as we get towards the tail end of this presentation. I'll show you some case studies on live actual campaigns that have been executed. But again, pretty simple metrics, right? So we did some simple A/B test splitting where we basically sent out a mail piece and a mail piece with digital ads. And again, this kind of average rate is very achievable. Obviously, we've had some that are considerably higher. Very few have gone any lower than that 20%. I think the worst I've ever seen is about 18.5%. So again, very effective at maximizing current existing marketing efforts that you're actually, putting out the door, so to speak. So as we kind of talk a little bit about how it works, obviously cost is always something that everyone has an eye on. So if you look at, how digital kind of falls into this whole cost structure of advertising in general, the reason I segue right into cost from the results part of it is, if you look at, the cost of a direct mail campaign these days, or the cost of an email campaign, a lot of people like to look at email as a very low-cost marketing channel, when in effect, if you're using it as a cold prospecting channel, you get such a low response as compared to direct mail. Your cost per lead acquired ends up being considerably higher than you might think the cost of an email campaign would be at the onset of the process. So if you look at the cost of digital advertising, it's a very low investment tool to bolt on to an existing campaign that looks to, again, increase the response rate by such a large margin, it ends up being extremely cost-effective means of, again, boosting what you're already doing. But then as you look out into the market, there are obviously a number of solutions out there for this type of capability, many of which will treat each of these little components here as their own billable events. What we'll review as we go through the steps in our process is how we really effectively bundle all of this together and handle every step of the process in one neat turnkey solution. So without further ado, as we're speaking about these steps, there's really about 5 steps in this process, which we'll review in great detail. So as Rob was mentioning at the beginning, Virtual DBS as a company pretty much maintains a record of every business and conversely every consumer in the United States, Canada, and we have quite a wealth of world data as well at this point. So we have access to quite a wealth of data. We do quite robust analytics on that data. We can also employ creative, although it's not one of our key areas. We'll get into this as we go. But then we do manage very effectively the campaign execution on digital, and then obviously provide some pretty robust debriefing and reporting. So it's really, again, as I mentioned, a turnkey solution to the challenge of digital advertising in a targeted fashion. So as I mentioned, this first step of data, and again, whether it be consumer or business data, because this particular solution can be used in either environment or both, as you'll see. Basically, what you're looking to do is, again, make sure that you have access either to information that's going to fill in the gaps in your existing data and or provide a wealth of potential prospect pool for you to select from, and then obviously go out and send out direct mail, email, digital ad serving, whatever combination of this omni-channel approach you may like to do. And as was mentioned earlier, we have quite a wealth of consumer data and business data, but one of the very unique things that we're able to also provide is a link between the two files, and find business executives at home or just really people in a working environment, linking them to their consumer situation. Now we have that taking place in about 20.3 million cases at this point. Now that's ever expanding as time goes on. Last month I think it was about 19. It's about 20.3 at this point and continues to grow. So as I mentioned, why is data so important? Obviously, you want to make sure you have standardized addresses, phone, email information, for this omni-channel kind of approach to marketing. But what we also stand to be able to do in this vast database is fill in the gaps on your records, right? So whether you're providing me data, or us data, I should say, to move ahead with this process, or you're looking to pull data from this massive data database of every consumer business, in whatever case you might be doing this, you want to make sure you have the most complete record that you can to basically either match, as we'll get to moving forward, or just simply learn as much about these people as we can to determine whether or not they're a good prospect, as we'll cover when we get into the analysis. So you have the ability to, again, have a very complete database, which then allows you to match data, again, to either be a business-to-business file, business-to-consumer file, or any of our other specialty files, whether it be our social media files, our real estate files, licensing, automotive databases, whatever the case may be, to, again, attain these attributes, which we have many hundreds of when you link all these databases together. It also allows you, obviously, to validate phone numbers and validate contact information and make sure all the demographics that you have are, in fact, correct when you have access, as I mentioned up here, to all of this information that you can then cross-validate. So as we kind of get in, I'm going to glaze over these last 2 points, as I want to kind of really cover this idea of analytics in this second step. I might back up to those other slides as we go, but again, I appreciate everyone's time, and I want to make sure we stay on time today, and I really want to cover this particular point of analytics. Now, basically,
hey, Scott, before you continue, there was a question that popped up that I thought might be good to ask. And it's, how much is telephone still a relevant channel for marketing? And is this via text or more as actual phone call? So
well,
telephone, yeah, go ahead.
Well, it depends. I mean, the phone piece of it, as I focus on it, isn't necessarily so much covered as a means of execution in this day and age. That's a great question. It's more or less a match point in many of our processes. Unless you're a nonprofit or have some sort of DNC exemption, it's a tough medium these days to really go out with. So as I speak about phone number, in most cases I speak to it from a matching perspective. Do we have the right John Smith, the right Jenny Jones? Is there a phone that we can match to an address, an email, some information that allows me to make sure it's the right person? So as I mentioned, I have all this data, I have all these people and all these businesses. If you have a file, and we'll talk about it here in analytics, so it's a very timely question. If I'm trying to build something for you and you want to go out and target best customers in general, certain customers in a certain segment, there's any number of ways you could approach modeling. But let's just say it's best customers as anyone on this call would define it, as you all probably have different definitions. Now, that particular person needs to be defined by sending me some information about, who you have in the database, what they've bought under strictest of non-disclosures, of course. And then what I'll do is match to it or add all the demographics I speak of about their ages, their incomes, their ethnicities, all their interests in online buying behaviors and social media information and cars they drive and so on. In order for me to do that, though, circling back to this question, I need to know that I have the right Michael Smith or Jenny Jones. And why I use those names is that obviously they can exist, the name John Smith. Which John Smith? So by having a phone number or an address or an email, any of these other kind of unique identifiers in someone's demographic profile, I can make that match confidently and say, okay, company ABC's John Smith customer is the John Smith in my database at 123 Main Street in North Kingstown, Rhode Island. And then we can move ahead with the demographic overlay. So a little bit of a long-winded answer, but to circle back to it, I would say telemarketing, quote unquote, whether it be via text or actual phone call, is a little bit less relevant, or maybe a decent amount less relevant. So as I speak to it, it's more from a matching perspective. So as we move ahead, no problem at all. So it really, again, segues into this discussion on analysis and analytics in general. So as I just mentioned, there's any number of ways that you can kind of slice this pie up. Analytics is a very broadly used word, predictive modeling, a very broad topic. Some people look at it as simple segmentation by one or two different elements. What we're doing is a very custom process that aims to really attack some sort of a BI question that you might have, and do so in a very effective manner, obviously at the end of the day, to inform your process, right? So whether the execution be direct mail, targeted ad serving, email, or all of the above, we want to make sure that we're targeting as best we can, the most pinpoint accurate list that we can get. Now, what we're aiming to do, as I mentioned, is take your data, just to reiterate it, and this is just a sampling here. As I mentioned, there's many hundreds of these, but on the consumer side, and any number of data points. On the B2B side, same situation. And the overall goal to do this is to basically get an extremely in-depth behavioral profile, and I'll back up to that in a moment, an extremely in-depth behavioral profile of what do these people look like. And again, that could be responders, who's likely to respond and then convert, who's my best, most profitable customer. These questions are all going to give you a different answer, as I'm sure you can understand. If you say, please find me more prospects that look like customers, that's anyone who spends a penny or more. Best customers could be most profitable, could be someone who buys most often or most frequently, depending on how you define that. So depending on what you're asking me, it's a different segment of the database, and we may analyze it a little bit differently. But what it would culminate in is something like this, which looks a little overly complex to those not familiar with analytics, but it allows me to basically throw all the prospects out in your universe into these buckets that rank them from top to bottom. So people that look 100% different as it relates to the the customer that we're analyzing, people that look 95% the same or better, and all the shades of gray in between. So that basically when we go to either pull a list from our database or conversely from your database, because we can score yours, we want to make sure that we're pulling the most highly scored records that we can so that we're reaching the most kind of low-hanging fruit prospect opportunities that we can. So basically, I apologize, I just nicked the button there. But basically, again, this idea of analytics is an extremely important step in this process. And again, the data piece of it, why I spent a minute there, is it's really, if you think about it, just to recap it, the foundation as to which this process is built on. You have to have good data, rich data, to be able to do analysis, to be able to pull the records. So again, this kind of phased process that we're able to do as a turnkey solution. So unlike other solutions out there that you may be kind of shotgun blasting out, messaging out into the universe via this kind of digital channel, I've bumped into a number of companies doing that. It's a far different process. We're targeting an individual that we know, based on some pretty in-depth analytics, is likely to be interested in, campaign X, whatever that may be, cross-sell, upsell, retention, what have you. So we do a lot of retention modeling, a lot of prospect identification, and so on. So as we get into the creative piece of it, I mentioned at the onset of this that it's really not our, core business. We can do this, certainly, but a lot of these campaigns, we're taking existing information from the clients or existing creative and putting into the necessary formats, as you can see here, kind of standard display advertising sizes. However, we can do video, we can do HTML5, which is just, if anyone's seen banner ads that kind of scroll and are animated. That's what that is. And then again, video would be something that you'd see on YouTube prior to whatever video you looked up starting, you have an actual video ad before that that takes place. So we're capable of executing pretty much any format of ads that we see out there in the market today. But the standard ones are more static, where you can click on a button to kind of learn more about whatever that product is that you're trying to get out there, or whatever the offer is. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about this as we get into execution. But basically, some of these sizes, if you will, are optimized for mobile. So we can serve across mobile and desktop applications, and I consider laptop/desktop the same sort of category as we talk about this. So if you've never done this, or you have no creative, we can certainly accommodate that. However, if you have any creative, and this simply could be something from your last direct mail campaign, you could simply send it along and we can resize it for you as well. So there's a number of different options to make this as easy a process for you as we can. So as we move into, again, this execution, as I mentioned, we're taking all of this data, doing this analysis, selecting the right Michael Smiths and Jenny Joneses to go out and message to. Basically, we have, as you can kind of see here in this little graphic here, a fairly large execution network that we can go out with. So you can kind of see, depending on how small your screens are, we're on Google and Yahoo and Microsoft and Facebook and YouTube and AppNexus and all these different providers. So as we actually go out and execute these ads to Michael Smith, think of it more as targeting Michael Smith than advertising on a website. So wherever he goes, because of the ad network that we have in place, we can potentially target him. So whether he goes on, Home Depot's website, or decides to surf Facebook, or check his email on Yahoo, or watch a video, as I mentioned, on YouTube, we can serve ads on all of those places. So wherever Michael Smith goes, we're going to be following him based on cookie tracking, which I haven't really talked too much about. I will at this point. So we know it's Michael. We know where he is and where he's going. And because of that kind of digital ID tag, we can watch where he's going and potentially get in front of him on any number of these kind of first-tier websites. Obviously, as we talk more about execution, you're able to, through this execution engine that we have, really eliminate a lot of click fraud, because that's a big thing that's out there as it relates to this particular topic as time goes on. Bots clicking on things and websites that generate false traffic and things of that nature. Our execution engine is kind of a real-time learning machine, if you will. So it's analyzing these campaigns as they go out the door, more than once a second, really, looking at who's clicking what, where they're clicking it, what types of sites they're coming from, and basically what time of the day, so that it can optimize these campaigns, moving forward, to make sure that you're basically getting the best click-through and the best viewability that you can as things move forward. So as it relates to that click fraud, we have a running list, if you will, of anything that has been identified either through our system or partnering systems as a kind of potential baddie, if you will, on that front. So we eliminate them right off the bat. And then the tool looks for any sort of repeat traffic. So if anything is clicking multiple times from the same location, it immediately terminates serving to that location, adds it to the list, and suppresses moving forward. So even if something does leak into the process, it's a very, very, very small percentage over time.
Hey,
so
Scott?
Again, yes.
Scott, I have another question for you.
Yep.
We have someone asking, we sell ammunition. Would there be an issue with you retargeting for us on Google? It's a very specific question, but it might be something that people are curious on with their particular, whatever they sell.
No, it's a very good question, and it's a little bit of a gray answer, possibly. And just for those on the call who aren't familiar with why this might be something that could be an issue, is anything related to, let's say, a hot button topic or the vices of alcohol, smoking, tobacco, things of that nature. You could potentially have some trouble serving ads on certain networks because they've electively decided to not serve that type of ad on their network. So I can say that I've done some campaigns in that arena. I've done some things for the alcohol industry. It really depends on the creative more than anything else. So if you have, and I could go, obviously way to one end or way to the other, you could have something as benign as simply, messaging as to what you're doing and not necessarily picture intensive, if you will, on your product. Or you could have somebody, firing an AK-47. The latter is probably going to get you terminated from certain networks. So it's a great question, and it does pose some challenges when you're selling a product like that, I'm not going to lie. But there are, and I don't want to say ways around it, but there are ways to mitigate the issue. So because I will say they were on so many different networks, you may have a problem serving on Google, but AppNexus as a provider can often, get to a lot of Google's network without going through Google, so to speak, directly, because a lot of these sites and locations to serve ads have multiple partnerships with multiple networks. So it doesn't necessarily eliminate you from being able to do a digital campaign, let's say. It may limit your exposure a little bit, but again, you can mitigate for that through the creative. And one of the processes or points in this process, as obviously I'm sure you could probably understand, I'm giving more of an overview here today and not going into all the nuts and bolts of this particular process, but one of the things that would happen is whether or not we're creating the ads themselves or they're being provided by the client, we will submit that for to the networks for approval. So before the campaign goes out, the ad's going to them, and we're saying, here's what we want to serve. Let us know your thoughts. And they come back and they say, thumbs up or thumbs down. This is a very, very quick process. It might take a couple hours at most. Usually if you send me creative, the next day we're good to go. But if it fails, we can always go back and edit it. And you can ask them why it fails. So as I mentioned, this alcohol product that I was working with, it was more or less a support product, if you will. They made very personalized barware, etching glasses with logos and whatnot, which it was specific for the bar, like the alcohol bar industry, if you want to call it that. And the first ad they sent, you could clearly tell there was alcohol on the rocks, and somebody was enjoying their alcoholic beverage in the ad. I kind of saw it and was like, I could see this being a problem. And sure enough, it got kicked back to us as, basically, I don't think we can serve this. So once we basically dictated, by the way, this is where the data comes into play again, back to them that, yes, the list has been pre-selected. Only those folks over the age of 21, A, will be seeing this. It's B2B related, and we'll take the alcohol out and just showcase the product itself with no alcohol. We got through. So it may not be that necessarily easy in the ammunition case, but there are ways to try and clean it, quote unquote, clean it up, if you will, as far as the ad servers are concerned to get that through. So again, a little bit of a long-winded answer, but I hope that covers the question. If you have
Yeah, I
more,
think it
certainly,
does. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. And certainly towards the end, feel free to follow that up if you see fit. So as we kind of go through this execution piece of it, I've mentioned cookies a couple of times. So to kind of play into that a little bit, we keep revisiting some of these topics over and over, and you kind of get a sense as to why, again, the data piece of it's so important. But having all these match points here at the beginning of the process allows me to really make a strong match to this digital ID, which again, in most cases, is a cookie. I can do an IP, right? But I prefer not to if I can avoid it. Now, I'll tell you the differences between the two. As I mentioned, a cookie is an individual ID tag. We know it's Scott Pontarelli. We know it's him on his machine. An IP is more or less the Pontarelli household, if you will. So it could be my wife or my kids, or it could be someone visiting my home using one of my computers. We don't know, but we know it's the household. Now, obviously, because of household matching, if you will, you can get a higher match rate on an IP. It's a little bit lower on a cookie, but it's far more accurate. So if I can live up here, in other words, the match rates are acceptable, I can do that. If they aren't, we'll fail over here and fill in and backfill with whatever we're unable to match. So even in the case where you're using IPs, it's usually a smaller portion of the list than this 80% might indicate to you, because you're probably matching a few more percent on from this 50. Now again, this is just the average, that we see. Not so much down towards the other end of that. That's when you get some kind of dirty data, so to speak. But again, as I mentioned, it's kind of denoted by these bullet points. You basically are looking at individual and then more household level tracking. Now there are some cases, let me toggle real quick just to get rid of my scribbles. There are some cases where IP could actually be something you might want to take a look at, more so on the B2B side of things. And why I say that is, we'll just take the Dingley Press, for example. They have an IP range in most cases for all employees at the company. If you want to target that IP range because you're serving ads related to a B2B process, or a B2B product rather, you could target anyone on their entire network because we know their IP. So if you're okay with getting in front of anyone at that company, that could be something that you want to take a look at. However, again, if it's very specific and only the office manager will do, and I'm just kind of picking that for example, then you might want to go with, again, cookie matching. And again, we could always get you more contacts and such at those companies through our databases. We have, through social media and LinkedIn type data, fairly robust, and I say fairly, being a little light on that, it's actually quite robust contact coverage of the universe. I think we've got about 86 million contacts at this point in the database, simply by, again, looking at a lot of social media data. So as we move forward, basically this idea, and I heard it couched in that question of, in one of the questions, retargeting. You'll see here, retargeting, right? Retargeting and digital ad serving are a little bit different. Now, retargeting is usually associated with someone you've engaged with in some way. They've hit your website, you've been able to cookie them. If there were some folks on the call doing that, you cookied them or ID'd them somehow when they visited your website. You have ID'd them in some way through an interaction with you. This is a little bit different, where it's more proactive, for identifying people who look like a certain group, going out and proactively finding them, may not know you exist, and we're getting in touch with them that way. However, I can still do retargeting. It's the same optimization engine. I can still cookie and actually do retargeting through this engine. So you can do it all kind of in one place. But again, to kind of get back on track here a little bit, each of these ads can have a link in it if you'd like. Some are specifically for branding and don't really have any call to action on them, although that's less frequent these days. But you'll land on a page of some kind, and you dictate that page. And what we're doing from a tracking perspective, as I speak about this reporting, is we're pixeling the landing page, and then we can also pixel a conversion. So if you're getting a confirmation of something, or you land on a page that requires you go to another page to complete the transaction, we pixel that one as well. So in other words, what happens is, as a result of that ad, we're tracking that person's interaction through the process, so that as we actually provide you back reporting, we know how many people are clicking and how many people are actually converting. And then the other thing we can do is, as you implement these with offline campaigns, obviously do test splits and matchbacks to basically make sure that we're getting the right numbers in terms of the success. Now, one of the other things that I mentioned, retargeting and also proactive digital ad serving that we can do is geofencing. Now, geofencing is a little bit different than what we've been talking about. From the standpoint of, as you can see in this map, I can pretty much drop a pin anywhere and go around that point in a radius of whatever I want and serve ads to anyone inside that radius, or I can pre-select it some way. So in other words, let me give you an example of something that we've done in the past. We have done this for sporting events, right? Whether it be for a Major League Baseball event or an NFL game. We can pin the center of that sporting event. Let's just say it's Yankee Stadium. Basically what you can do is draw a circle around Yankee Stadium of, say, 500 feet, or maybe it's 800 feet, so you capture some of the people on the sidewalk walking by the stadium, and you can serve ads to anyone in that radius about the game or sporting apparel that you're trying to serve, or deals at vending, or whatever it may be, or season tickets, or so on. But it's likewise usable for trade shows. You could serve ads at trade shows. You could also target a radius in miles around brick and mortar locations for those of you that have store locations. You could go in a 5-mile radius of your store location, but you can also pre-select that universe and say only people who meet this criteria in that circle, only people who score highly based on the model within that circle, whatever the case may be. And again, because of the way we're serving, you're also hitting mobile applications. And so again, people on their iPhones or their Android devices or their tablets are also going to see the ad. So again, a useful way of kind of repackaging, if you will, this tool with a geographic component to it, should there be one. We use this for a lot of kind of chain stores and things of that nature, again, sporting events, trade shows, things like that. So again, the debriefing. This is what factors into, I mentioned, all this reporting that we're able to deliver on a day-by-day basis that shows you what your campaign's doing, how many ads are going out, who's clicking, where are they going, is this working, things of that nature. So not only are we doing that, but if we're building a model, some of the slides that you saw earlier in the presentation are actually slides that I took from debriefings on modeling. So when we build a model to predict who's the most likely or most profitable customer, do I just say it's these people, trust me, and move on to digital ad serving? No, it's a far more detailed process than that. We'll basically output very detailed findings on reporting, and again, also the demographic appends, who falls into what categories, why the model's saying what it's saying, and walk you through the entire process of how the model was built and the intelligence that you can gather from it. And that is yours at the end of the process, right? So whether, again, you do digital or whatever, right, fill in the blank, you now have a very good understanding and analysis of the group of people that we kind of put that magnifying glass on. So the debriefing itself is not only there to interpret the results of the data and the modeling, but it's also there to measure success and give you an ongoing look at how the campaign's performing over time. So again, a very, very important piece of this puzzle, if you ask me, because you need some actionable insight, as I like to say, as a result of these processes. So we've pretty much gone over, again, why this might be something of interest in terms of increasing response rates and overall ROI, a little bit on how it works, and I've provided some vague examples in there, but what I'd like to do is kind of go through in a little bit more detail, what this has done for people out there, or people, or I should say companies. So I've written up just a couple of brief overviews on some companies we've worked with, this one being SONUS hearing centers. So as I mentioned, this is kind of the approach that we take, where we're approached with a challenge of some kind, right? Improve direct mail response in a specific area. So this has a geographic component to it. So what we did, as I mentioned, is we built a customer cloning model. So we said, okay, within the area of San Diego, which is your kind of hot button challenge area, what do those people look like who actually do business with you? And we found those highest propensity prospects, and basically, took that prospect pool and served 250,000 digital ads to them over the course of a couple of days leading up to the mail campaign, and I think 1 or 2 days, excuse me, after the in-home date of that mail piece. So basically, the results of it were the clicks were relatively strong. It wasn't too bad. The industry standard click-through rate, just to give you some context, is around 0.05 to 0.08, depending on the sources that you look at. Our average is double that, and that's our average. It's not that uncommon to see 3 times that rate through the optimization engine that we're able to, bump that up, and also through the modeling component, we're contacting the right people. But in this case, it wasn't so much the clicks that really did it for us. It was basically, how it had an effect on responders in general. So it was basically able to, do the following. You could see here a little bit of that tracking that I mentioned. So you could see we had all these different creatives, and basically the dates that they went out. You could see September and October, and then basically some different geographies. So you can split it out any different way you want, but the number of impressions, how many clicks we got, and what the overall click-through percentages were. So some of them were not that good, and some of them were very good. So basically, this kind of adds another component to it, is testing different creative, different messaging, and so on. But again, this particular campaign was very, very successful at driving overall response higher through a number of different channels. The clicks weren't as high as we'd like to see them, but the overall response on direct mail and other channels of input were very, very high. This particular example is one of our clients, Sage, which is a very large software provider for those on the phone who are familiar with them. You've probably seen the name. Very large company. In their case, we were presented with a little bit of a different challenge. For those who may market in Canada, you know that the Castle Law, as it's called, really prevents you from pretty much doing any one-to-one marketing in Canada. So we can't send direct mail, can't do email, no phone call, nothing. So what do? Well, there's no rules that say we can't serve digital ads in a targeted fashion. So that's basically what we did for them. They didn't really have very much of another option in this case. So it allowed them to, continue marketing to their opt-out prospects, and we matched them to our database. We're able to append a cookie, so we knew it was them. And then we basically got, again, as I mentioned, far more than double, in this case, the average click-through rate on those ads. So it basically took an unmarketable database. You can't do anything with these people, and allowed the message to go out and actually get some response and generate some sales as a result of it. Now, obviously, you can track this out further. In certain cases, some people can revisit based on seeing an ad. We can track it for as long as you'd like. Sometimes, obviously, they have a cutoff. So this is what we knew of the immediate run. So I think we tracked it for 2 weeks after the campaign terminated. And this is what we attributed. So again, I'm going to go into this last slide here. I'm going to glaze over that one in the middle, just because I think based on how much time we have left, this is a more important slide to take a look at. So I mentioned, actually, my barware folks happen to be this last slide here. And I mentioned at the onset of the presentation this idea of doing A/B testing. So they were really, really focusing on trying to get a much more effective direct mail campaign out the door. As no matter how advanced, if you will, this idea of digital becomes and how much of a kind of a sexy topic it is out there in the market, we've seen a ton of influx on interest, direct mail is still highly, highly effective. There's just no way around it. pretty much as a baseline average the highest response rate that we see. We do a ton of digital and email and various other campaigns. So how do we get a better bang for the buck on direct mail? So what we did is we said, we do this all the time. Let's couple a digital campaign into the mix, and we'll try a small pilot test, and we'll do an A/B test split and review the results and see what you think. So we basically did the same type of situation we did for SONUS, where a couple of days before the mail piece was to drop in home, and then for a 3-week period following, we basically sent out these ads. And at the conclusion of the campaign, we just did a simple match back and looked at the results, and we got a 30% lift in response, which is on the lower side of our average rate, but it still basically netted them quite a number of new customers that they'd never been in front of before, that otherwise would not have responded to them had they not gotten that digital component to the campaign that either drives them to the direct mail piece, or the direct mail piece drove them to click the ad because maybe they don't typically respond to direct mail. So again, just really reiterates the effectiveness of this tool to boost existing things. And I say things being, marketing campaigns that you're doing present state. So we've taken a little bit of a different approach than some of the other companies out there that want to replace what you're doing. Direct mail, that's ancient. No one does that anymore. It's no good. I simply don't subscribe to that based on the numbers. It's not a gut feeling. I simply look at the numbers being an analytics person. And what we said, how can we make this a more effective process? How can we cut those people that we don't want to look at and maybe backfill them with more people that are good prospects for the use of data and modeling? And then how can we kind of piggyback on that with some sort of digital component? And then basically what you see here are, again, some of the outputs of what you might see from this this reporting execution engine, shown as a kind of a bar and a line chart at the same time, really, by day, how many impressions went out as a bar, and what the click percentages were by this line. And you can see it just simply summarized lifetime over here. So depending on the nature of what you'd like to see, we can customize the outputs as well. So that, finishing up kind of right on the nose here, is kind of a introductory walkthrough of this particular tool from one end to the other. I'm going to hand the microphone back to Rob, the moderator, and hopefully we can address some questions that you all might have as a result of my talking at you for 45 minutes.
Well, thanks,
Rob?
Scott. I appreciate it. Now let's take a few minutes to answer a couple of questions during the webinar. If you have questions that you'd like to pose right now, feel free to put those in the question box on your right-hand pane, and we'll try to get to those. We only have a couple. First one is, and I think you've kind of addressed this, is what kind of match rate might I get? So I know every industry is different, but you were giving us some numbers earlier. Do you care to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question. You're right. I did talk about it a little bit, but it's something that comes up on pretty much in any meeting I have for any capability that I offer that has modeling as a component to it. In this case, we're matching for modeling, and we're also matching to kind of assign that digital tag, whether it be individual or household level. It's a very variable number, and what ends up happening, and why it's such a good question in this case, one of our real key advantages over our competition as it relates to this tool, or in general, is having this record of every consumer in every business. So the match rate varies considerably by the quality of your data. What do you have? Because if you send me John Smith in Massachusetts and that's all you know, there's not really much you can do with that. There's lots of them. If you have 1 or 2 identifying pieces of information, it's really going to help me. But when I can make that initial match to my database, the floodgates are now open. And what I mean by that is I have a database of billions of emails, billions with a B. And the reason that I have that is people say, oh, there's not that many emails out there. We keep a very lengthy historical running database of emails because something you have, maybe 4 or 5 years old, that person may have moved on potentially. But I have it in the archive attached to that person. I can still append that information and submit it for cookie matching. So what I'm able to do is more or less enhance your data. append more address information, add more contacts, 4, 5, 6 emails if I have it, phone numbers, so on and so forth, and really get that match rate up there. That's why that's a little bit of a wide range on that slide. When I say that's 30% to upwards of 80% in certain cases, it's really depending on what I'm sent. But again, if you have relatively clean data from the standpoint of you've got some contactability, a mailing address, an email, something to that effect. It's not uncommon to be more or less in that, like I'd say 60 to 80% is more or less an average for quote-unquote clean data. You get down to that 30% when you're lacking some of the key points that even allow me to make that match.
And the next question is about building a prospect list. So, all the catalogers have their house files, and the house files are kind of their go-to people to try to, build their business and whatnot. But sometimes they're challenged with increasing their prospects. How can they work with someone like you and build a prospect list that is relevant? Because a lot of these people are in very specific markets. They're not exactly sure how to they think they already have the universe of people. So can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yes, that's a great question. As a number of the folks that we work with are using kind of a co-op database, response data, however you want to label it, which usually is very good data but very finite. So I'll pick on myself for this example, as I normally do when I get this question. I'm a huge car nut. I race cars. It's a hobby of mine. You probably won't find more of a car enthusiast than me. But if you're looking in co-op database at Motor Trend Magazine's mailing list and Car and Driver and all these co-op databases for automotive information, you're not going to find me. I don't subscribe to any of those magazines. I don't do any of that. So I'll just kind of go under the radar screen. Now, through our process of predictive modeling, you're looking at it a little bit differently. I take your data internally just for the matching portion under non-disclosure, and then I discard your data, destroy it, and provide written proof of that, just for those that worry about security. So anyway, once we've done that, I'm going to append all these hundreds of different attributes that identify why people do business with you. So if you think about a neighborhood, most people in neighborhoods are somewhat similar. They're little pockets around their respective towns and states and in the country. And in certain geographic areas tend to be relatively similar. So if you've got a neighborhood of 10 people and 2 of them do business with you and the other 8 don't, why? That's what modeling aims to do. What similarities do all of your customers share demographically and behaviorally, and what differences do they have from everyone else in their communities? Do they tend to be higher income? To what degree? Do they tend to have higher home values, bigger families, different interests, different donating behaviors, different online shopping habits, all these types of things? So when we build that model that I was kind of alluding to in the presentation, it's using behavioral and demographic attributes on a much wider scale than a simple, auto enthusiast flag may, in my case, allowing you to go out and score every single person as to how closely they resemble that profile. So myself, maybe I'm 100%. I'm like, a huge bullseye. You definitely want to go after me. But someone in my neighborhood, maybe they don't race cars, but they kind of tinker with a street car, and they have Corvette or something, and they still like cars. Maybe they're not as interested in buying some crazy rocket fuel or something that you're trying to sell them to make their car go faster. But they're definitely somebody that you might want to get in front of. So he's going to get a score, but it may be a little bit lower than mine. So the point being is it's going to do a very deep dive on who these people are, what they look like, and how closely they resemble your existing best customers, so that when we go out and kind of put these people in buckets, you know exactly who you're going after and why. That's part of that debriefing as well. We give you all the intelligence as to why we're saying or recommending what we're recommending.
All right. Scott, I think that's our last question.
Okay.
I hope everybody found the webinar helpful, not only interesting and informative, but ultimately helped you as you employ your business strategy for driving more sales. If you have additional questions for Scott or myself, please feel free to contact us. You can see our contact information on the screen. Thank you for listening in on our webinar, and have a great day, everyone. Thank you.